I'm extremely inspired by, for example, human rights lawyers in China who will proactively want to represent Tibetans who have come under the arm of the law and who will, as a consequence, be deregistered, and that sort of action will affect their whole life. And I think for the Han Chinese nationality to go to the extent of supporting Tibetans, they know fully what's happening, and they cannot live under that system that countenances human rights abuses. I have made many trips to Tibet, one recently, and it's a very sad situation. Now, I think we have to recognise that the degree of harshness, the bloody sort of responses we get are the sign of a government in decline, because if it was such a small matter, there wouldn't be the level of response that there is. I think if we look back historically, the uprising in central Tibet in 1989 actually, and I suspect that a number of Chinese at the top feel that there's a connection between the uprising in 87 through to 89 in Tibet and what happened in Tiananmen Square in 89, 90. Leading to the Tiananmen Square massacre. So I think sovereignty, what the Chinese government perceives as sovereignty issues, goes at the very heart of their rule over what is a vast colonial territory. I've had Hong Kong people tell me that the level of freedom they have in Hong Kong, for instance, is only as a display for Taiwan. I've had Hong Kong people say that the moment Taiwan returns to the Great Motherland, Hong Kong freedom is finished forever. Now, I think that the Communist Party has a range of problems right now, and I think this is why we're seeing such terrible responses to what's seen as a sort of a barbarian sort of fringe group that they don't really have full legitimacy over. And of course, symbolically, under His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they know that they don't have full legitimacy. I'd like to highlight today Tibetan singers who, especially in eastern Tibet, have been quite amazing in the songs that they have written and sung and developed whole albums, and I see these people, amongst many others, as being equally the heroes of Tibet, just as the self-immolators, because to write song words like these, you have to know the risks you are taking, you have to know that it's only a matter of time before you're picked up at 3 o'clock in the morning by paramilitary, and they will be tortured if they don't give the right answers, which they're probably not likely to, in relation to hating the Dalai Lama, etc., because their songs actually indicate quite contrary. So their lives are finished too. So there are many great heroes taking place, heroistic sort of actions taking place in Tibet as we speak. Further to the self-immolations, now the Chinese government has criminalised any action deemed to be supporting or encouraging the self-immolations. But it's quite hideous, because while I was in Tibet, for example, some 12 Tibetans who were helping to carry off one of these charred bodies were later picked up, and they will probably serve sentences from 10 to 15 years for literally just paying respects to the body. Two of those people were 12 years old. Now, I think that this goes beyond any sort of sense of human rights. And what's happening is, because more and more innocents in Tibet are being drawn into the dragnet, that the Tibetan population are being fully radicalised. Imagine if we came from that same village, we knew these two 12-year-old boys, they're not even adults, and their life is finished. You wouldn't care what you did in future. You really wouldn't care what actions you took and how it may place you at risk. So I'd just like to read a few words from some of these songwriters. Quite amazing. One is from Umdo Malo, that's a place in Umdo. The song is The Lord Across the Distant Land by Cherub. Lord, the Lord is in the distant land, beyond the distant mountains, narrating the rise and fall of the snowland. Remembering a humble boy like me, Lord, where is the Lord's voice? It is on the rooftop of the world, proclaiming the good message of peace. Remembering a humble boy like me, Lord, where are the Lord's thoughts? They are on the peak of the snow mountains, manifesting in the radiance of the snow mountains, remembering a humble boy like me. Cherub was arrested in September 2012. This next song by Dawo, and he was from Kham, Yulgan in Kham. I Ma, 3 jewels, in the land of snows, the heroic youth of Tibet, making offerings of their bodies. The heroic youth of Tibet, making offerings of their bodies. Counting the months and years with a rosary, life is still the most precious thing. Offering their lives to the snow land, our hearts will not forget. Offering their lives to the snow land, our hearts will not forget. From the Patala Palace, the Supreme Protector Tenzin Gyatso traversed many passes and valleys. The children remained behind. Traversed many passes and valleys. The children remained behind. And this songwriter I actually became familiar with through friends in Tibet just recently. His name is Gebe. If any of you get an opportunity, go onto YouTube and put in Tibetan singer. Certainly the site High Peaks Pure Earth have many songs like this translated. They're exquisite, the words are unbelievable. I'm surprised at how long they have got away with this sort of language, even if it was only 6 months or 12 months. And I need to say that I actually looked around to see if I could buy any of Gebe's tapes. They've no doubt been removed from all shops everywhere, but they're freely available on the internet. Interestingly, I was even at a Tibetan restaurant, and there were 1 or 2 of these songwriters who'd gone to prison, being freely, with the video clip as well. The most marvellous scenery is done with these video clips. This one is by Gebe, also from Umdo, from the Ngabo region, where we've seen a lot of these self-immolations connected with Kirti Gompa. Victory to the gods, victory to Tibet. Today, victory to the Dalai Lama. Today, victory to the fine leader of Tibet. Today, victory to the coming of happiness. Today, victory to the Dalai Lama. Today, victory to the fine leader of Tibet. Today, victory to the coming of happiness. Victory to the gods, victory to Tibet. Today, victory to the 6 million. Today, victory to Tibet, the source of knowledge. Today, victory to Tibetans of the snow land. Victory to the gods. Victory to Tibet. Today, victory to our great kinsmen. Today, victory to Tibetans around the world. Today, victory to the children of the snow land. And Gebe went missing 2 weeks before I actually arrived in Tibet. So, again, I'd like to stress the point that what we see today, I believe, is not some little marginalised thing as far as the Chinese government is concerned. I think they are deeply worried by so many things happening in mainland China. And I think they believe that if Tibet starts to, in their terms, crumble in any way, that the whole of communist rule will fall like a deck of cards. And I think that's why we're seeing. So I think despite the terrible things happening there, I think there are elements in which we can rejoice in, because first of all, the Tibetan people are not prepared to lay down and have their culture die. That is really the thing that is going to save Tibet. These people are standing up for the 6 million Tibetan people, and we should do everything in our power to help them, to support them, even though we get no media, etc. I think there are encouraging signs in mainland China. I mean, there was the incident in Wuhan where I think some environmental concerns, people in Guangzhou province massed in tens of thousands and ended up throwing the police force out and the military out. The first time in history since 1949 when the Communist Party did not have control over its whole territory. I heard another anecdotal story. I haven't picked it up on the net yet, but the government a month or two back was talking about closing down the microblog site Weibo, which is equivalent to Facebook or whatever. There was such an uproar amongst the sort of netosphere, if I can call it that the government backed down. Another incident that happened recently, which I think is a litmus, it's a sign of things to come. One of the more liberal papers in Guangzhou province, I think it's called the Southern Weekly or something like that, they published an editorial saying that with the level of corruption and moral decay taking place day by day, that without full democratic reforms, full political reforms, this government was on its last leg. Now, the government immediately pulled the editorial and placed in its place some glorification of the Communist Party. Quite ironic, really. All of the journalists from this Southern Weekly newspaper, they could see their rights being eroded. They decided no, and they all went out on strike. People in Guangzhou province came out by their thousands. The government finally told them, go back to work, we will not punish any of you, we will not have any further editorial interference. We will not have any further editorial interference in your newspaper. So it's interesting, whether they meant that or not, for the Communist Party of China that is so almighty to back down and realise how far they can go. So they realise that the level at which they can go now, because of, as Geshe-la said, increased education, huge increase in middle class Chinese want much more freedom, generally. Doesn't matter whether we call it democracy or anything. And as Geshe-la identified, Xi Jinping himself only weeks ago said the level of corruption is such that if we don't do something about it, then the days of the Communist Party are numbered. And I think that's absolutely right. But I say to Xi Jinping, and I'll turn to speak to Xi Jinping, I say that yes, Chinese people, Chinese culture, magnificent culture, long history, very good history with its Buddhist neighbours. I think things can be turned around. I say you want to remove corruption. I say you need to really bring in rule of law. How do you bring in rule of law so that people get some sense of social justice? And that is if you put the legislative arm of government at arm's length from the executive of government, exactly as we do in democratic countries. You cannot have political interference in court systems. What has happened to the Tibetans largely, to many Chinese people,